For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, joined by Chris Treviño for instant analysis from USC's Tuesday practice of Maryland week. Chris, welcome to your week. A Maryland graduate, a Maryland boy. This has got to feel like a pretty big week to you. Kind of your Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, kind of my Super Bowl. I don't get paid or anything. I don't get a ring regardless of the results. I feel like I am the captain for USCFootball.com this week. We have a fake captain for our site, so I feel like naturally I should get it. But that's a lot of pressure, Jack.
Yeah, we rotate our captains week by week, just like USC. Not even a trip to Disney World or anything after? Not the normal Super Bowl festivities?
Just going to Wawa. Like, that's what they say. Where are you going? I'm going to Wawa.
And the meetup.
And the meetup. I'll be there at the meetup.
So it's Chris Treviño week, and that I thought was going to be the headline of Instant today, just a big week for Chris over here. But we got breaking news from head coach Lincoln Riley today. USC breakout defensive lineman Anthony Lucas, who got banged up on Saturday, is out for the season, according to Lincoln Riley, with a lower extremity injury. Had a procedure done this morning, and once again, Chris, it feels like USC loses maybe its best defensive player, who is in the merge of a really breakout year.
Tough blow for USC's defense, especially on that defensive front that doesn't have a lot of playmakers across the board. Now, Anthony Lucas, without a tackle for a loss or a sack, but you saw his impact as a run defender and, getting pressure at times for this front. So a loss across the board. And Lucas, a former five-star prospect, transfer from Texas A&M, had improved a lot under Coach Henderson and, another year with Sean Newis. So, USC, another devastating injury for them, a loss for them, and we weren't exactly expecting that. You did see him get banged up at the end of that Penn State game. He actually left the fourth quarter in the Penn State game, much similar to how he left the Minnesota game. Almost got carted off in that game, but was able to shake it off and even play in the Penn State game. So he did get banged up enough where he was, had to undergo the procedure. So a big loss for this defensive front. Now the question is, what's going to happen? Who's going to step up in the absence of number 6?
Yeah, Trojans are in the hundreds nationally in terms of sacks. They only have 6 sacks through 6 games, and a couple of those have come from the linebackers. The edges, the 3 primary guys had been Anthony Lucas, Jameel Muhammad, Braylon Shelby. I tweeted yesterday, have combined for 2.5 tackles for loss and 1 sack as a group. Now, Lucas was the best of any of them at getting pressure, so USC, a team that really hasn't gotten any pass rush going, you're wondering back half of the season, can that improve? They're going to have to do it without likely their best pass rusher. So who do you think steps up in that role? We've seen a couple other people rotate and get snaps, but who do you think will step up to fill the void?
Well, obviously, you're going to have some of those veteran guys pick up more snaps. Jameel Muhammad, obviously one of their co-starters and a guy that's played a lot of minutes. Braylon Shelby, the young sophomore that hasn't really fully clicked yet, but has the talent to do so. Solomon Tuliaupupu has played a lot in reserve or backup roles when guys need rotation, so I expect him to get more reps. But the big one is Cameron Fountain. I mean, this is a true freshman that was a huge signing for USC out of Georgia, top 100 player, 4-star defensive end, looks like a guy, 6'6", 265 pounds, has played scout team for most of the fall season. He is still raw, still isn't quite sure what he's doing out there, and obviously you need to develop that knowledge, that football IQ. You need to know what you're doing in the defense to get out on the field, or things aren't going to go your way. But so much talent there, and the first clue that he's going to get more reps is he did not come out in a scout team jersey, a.k.a. a number other than his own, his number 49. He came out with his number 49. We saw today Abasiri several weeks ago come out with his jersey number, and he's been part of the rotation. Now Cameron Fountain out of scout, it seems, and looks like he's going to have to play a bigger role, or at least get some minutes behind Jameel Muhammad, Solo, and Braylon Shelby. And a guy like Sam Green as well, who is starting to get more minutes. This is a homecoming for Sam Green, much like myself. He is from Baltimore. But Cameron Fountain, that's the big one. There's a lot of talk about depth and not having talent in the wings. Well, that is a talented guy they have. Cameron Fountain, that is a top guy every team in the country would love to have on their roster to develop. So Cameron Fountain, we're going to see what he's going to be able to do. I would be shocked if he didn't play in this game because they need some spark. Now, he is a true freshman, and as I mentioned, still raw. But if he can give you something, I think he has a sack on the year or a tackle for a loss during that Utah State game, but he's so explosive, so athletic. If they can just coach him up a little bit more, I think he can have an impact.
I think he had maybe 2 TFLs in that game against Utah State. He was very impactful against, again, Utah State, but it's interesting to see if he gets a little bit more run. We've seen the true freshmen in Desmond Stevens and Jade Abasiri get some run over the last couple of weeks and make impactful plays. And for USC, looking for anything from the edge rushers, you want to turn to a guy that's supposed to be the future and see if, maybe the future can spark up right now. Because Lincoln Riley mentioned as he talked to us today, how many guys can you point around and say that you've been around, hey, that guy turned out to be a cornerstone player in your program, and it's because they got their first opportunity in a moment like this, getting thrust into a starting role or a backup role earlier than expected because someone went down or someone had to step aside. And I think he thinks that guys like Cameron Fountain, Sam Green, those other guys that you mentioned could be those potential spark plugs. And it's coming, I think, at a position that USC needs to see the most improvement from over the back half of the season.
Absolutely. And like you said, they have to be put in that position. We haven't seen Cameron Fountain since the Utah State game where we had those 2 tackles for loss. So now, how much growth has he done in those 5 weeks since we haven't seen him? You hope it's a lot. And, it's going to be in a stadium. Going to be on the road. Maryland's offensive line, not that good. So I think it's a really easy first game to kind of ease him into and playing major minutes. Like, hey, go out there in the second quarter. We need a spark here. Or maybe he starts the game. Probably doesn't start the game, but whatever. He's going to have a bigger role moving forward through the back half of the season, and they need people to step up. They already needed people to step up with the lack of sacks. Braylon Shelby, all those guys, Jamil Muhammad, all those guys needed to step up. Now they really need someone to step up because you lost Anthony Lucas, Eric Gentry out indefinitely, Bear Alexander redshirting. Those 3 of their top 5 guys coming into the season are down for them. So USC needs some spark, some juice anywhere on that defensive front.
What were some of the other main practice observations today? The Lucas news was obviously the biggest breaking news, but what else caught your attention today?
Well, it being people that did practice, and tight end Lake McCree, we mentioned that he practiced last week in full pads, but did not suit up for the Penn State game. He was going to be close, but probably leaning towards doubtful for this one. But he came out again in full pads, dressed out, looked well moving around. I would say he's pretty close to maybe coming back fully for this offense, which could use another weapon for Miller Moss. And obviously, Lake McCree, before he went down, was a trusted weapon for Miller Moss. So looks like he's really close. And then Jacoby Covington, who was kind of on the fringe last week after getting banged up in Minnesota, did not play against Penn State. He was back in full pads, and he looked like he was full go. Wasn't any limitations with him. I think they're easing him back in this week, but I would be shocked if he did not play this weekend.
Yeah, with the war of attrition and everybody going down, anytime USC can get somebody back, whether that was Akili Arnold from a couple of weeks ago or whoever they can get back on the defense, is really big for a group that is becoming pretty banged up. And it kind of sucks to see because USC's defense had made such a stark improvement, and we've noted that throughout the entirety of the year. And now we see if Danton Lynn can get things done, not with the key group that included probably coming into the year Bear Alexander, Anthony Lucas, Eric Gentry, some of the guys that they have lost for either the season or indefinitely. Now we see what Danton Lynn I think is really made of, having to play with guys that maybe weren't intended to be in starting roles or backup roles. And I think we've seen development from guys like that, like a Devin Tompkins, who was not on our radar before the year, and he has turned into USC's most productive defensive interior guy in terms of getting to the passer. He led USC in pressures against Penn State. So very curious to see how Danton Lynn handles this. Obviously getting players back helps, but the main key to me is what can he do knowing that he's lost some of his biggest defensive weapons.
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously a storyline that needed to be monitored going into this year, is USC's depth. And I'm not just talking about their offensive line, which is something we harped on, but across the board defensively, if they lose a couple guys, they're really in trouble, which is why Bear Alexander was our number 1 most important in our series for this year, because they didn't have a lot of depth. And now you're seeing, hard games, hard, narrow games being played in the Big Ten. Physical, a lot of flags not being thrown on some plays, a lot of holding, a lot of chippiness. So you're seeing that build up over time, and that's what some of the Big Ten reporters, from our sister sites were telling us. Like, it's rugged in the Big Ten. Yeah, you could get beat up in a game, but you're going to get beat up against Minnesota. You're going to get beat up against those lower team guys, and it keeps building up and building up. Do you have the depth to sustain, like, what this team is going to look like against Notre Dame? We don't really know. They're dropping, it seems, 1 every week. So USC does not have the depth. They're trying to hold it together, but they got a long back half of the year to come. They have 1 bye week in the middle there, so then maybe that'll help a little bit. But, yeah, you're seeing a lack of depth across the roster, especially on the defensive side. come to fruition right now, and we'll see if USC can hold on and ride it out and maybe get something from some of the young guys.
USC makes its furthest trip of the season this week, going to Chris Treviño's homeland, playing Maryland on Saturday, and they'll have to do it without Anthony Lucas. Pretty top-heavy news day today. There's not a ton else to report on, but if you want to go watch the interviews from the offensive players we got to talk to or from Lincoln Riley, you can find those here on YouTube, and you can check out uscfootball.com for more content. But for Chris Treviño, I'm Jack Smith. Thank you for watching Instant Analysis. We'll see you tomorrow.